Much later.
Honestly, I'm speechless. Okay, no, sorry, that's a cheap joke, but damn, I'm genuinely thankful for the support and also surprised to see how much people were so keen to offer their perspective on this topic. Originally, I was going to make part 2 nonetheless, no matter how well this video is going to do, but looks like now part 2 is definitely needed. So without further ado, here's part 2, to why unpredictability could change shooter games forever. Oh, just in case if you're wondering why I actually sound a bit different right now, is because I'm now back in the UK for my university study, and for some reason there's a lot of echo in my room, so I have to put a filter over my voice to reduce that. And also plus I'm a bit ill right now, so yeah. If I sound a bit off, I do apologize for that. To start, I'm just gonna briefly run through how this video is going to go. If you haven't watched the previous video, which I would recommend you to watch for better context, basically I ended the video on a note saying, oh, I don't really feel qualified enough to keep speaking on this topic and I don't know how to explore it further. Well, about that. With some asking around, I was actually able to get the chance to interview a few people that I thought are very much qualified to give opinions on this topic who all have very solid backgrounds.
I'm Miloshki, although most people just call me Miles. My main game has been Apex for the longest time. I guess like the experience I have with it is about 2.5 years of comp, going from very entry level you'd have when you first start all the way up to LCQ just this year for qualifying for the Japan Champs LAN, which happens in February. Outside of that, I've also got experience in Counter-Strike. I used to play uni Counter-Strike at my old uni. I've got like 4-ish thousand hours in that, along with, you know, just like various experience playing other titles.
Hi, my name is Bear. I'm a UK CS2 player with about 5,500 hours played. I'm currently level 10, 2.3k face at Elo. I've competed in and made playoffs in 2 UKIC Division 3 and DSCA seasons, and also National Student Esports. I qualified to Division 2 with my team. I've experienced in pretty much every role. I've played as an IGL, an entry, an AWP, and a lurker on my team, but currently I play as a lurker.
Hello. Penis. Chungus. Pickle. Fortnite.
What? Okay.
Gritty. I'm gonna give people a terrible perspective. No one's gonna listen to me now.
Okay.
They're gonna be like, I don't want to know the opinion of the pickle, Fortnite, penis, Chungus. Gritty.
No, you did the
Am I just off the introduction? You're asking a question.
The introduction.
I'm Noble. I was a top 500 Overwatch player in season 1 through 13, all of them. And then I came back in season 20, and I was top 500 season 20, 21, 22, 23. And then season 23, I peaked at top 10 on NA for support. And then season 4, I peaked at rank 26 in Europe. At some point, I was top 200 Korea, but I don't remember when, because I was playing on 100 billion ping from South Africa.
Oh, before we move on, there's actually one more person that I interviewed that I unfortunately have to voice over him, as I have failed to mention to him that the recording is going to be on a YouTube video. Basically, he asked if I cannot include his voice in the video. I mean, he did still offer me the option to still do it anyway, was saying whatever is more convenient, but I feel like it's better to respect his request. In short, his name is Kenny Carey. He has 10k hours in CS, used to be #1 facing in Hong Kong, top 400 in EU, played with and against pros like Olaf Meister and Fasher, and is also better than me at Apex. What's more interesting was he only answered the third question. But while only answering the third question, he kind of answered the other 2 questions at the same time. And he was the only person who disagreed with the theory. Oh, and also he showed me some gameplay footage which I gotta figure a way out to show because he was talking a lot in them. Now, with the introductions out of the way, here's how this video is going to go. I'm going to let the interview of the 3 individuals that don't have any problem with their voice being in the video play first in order to these 3 questions, which I've showed them in advance before the interview. First question. What is your view on the idea of unpredictability within a game that you're really good at? Second question. Do you think the idea of unconventional plays are often overlooked compared to things like mechanics or the right plays? Third question. The person who can actively pull off smart plays, hence unpredictable plays, will be the best player in the world. How much do you agree or disagree with this statement and why? And after we go through with everyone, I'm going to read out my translation on my interview with Kenny. Since he only answered 1 question, it will be better to hear everything in context. And finally, I'm then going to try my best to summarize what everyone said and then make a final conclusion. This could go horribly wrong, with me ending up going insane trying to organize everything, or we succeed in reorganizing everything that was given to me and manage to make a final conclusion. on whether or not my original theory is viable. Because I'm doing all the editing and recording by myself, videos like this take a very long time to make. It will mean a lot to me if you can show any form of support for me so I can grow and improve as a YouTuber for the future. So please like and subscribe to the channel, and let's get started.
Obviously, like, Apex is quite different to a lot of other games. It's inherently very RNG and randomness based, purely just by nature of like the battle royale. In a lot of senses, there's like, compared to other games, I would say, there's a lot more sort of mental priming that occurs with regards to like unpredictability, especially when it comes to like sort of general game strategy in terms of how do we win the game from here. We're not talking about stuff being like completely random, but there is sort of like a pseudo randomness. Like, you're never going to know what loot you're going to get, how far the ring's going to pull, anything like that. You know, you can't fully predict what comps the other teams are playing, although obviously there's sort of a general meta. Outside of that, you've obviously got like very much the idea of making sort of unpredictable plays as well, like taking a gamble for trying to win, or equally just trying to do something to like outsmart your opponents. I'd say that all of these are like very much at the core of like playing Apex at a high level. Any player is going to sort of construct a kind of mental model of the game, right, as they play. And I guess the action of getting better in general is more or less just equivalent to refining that model. In an ideal world, the entire mental model would be like logically generated, you know, like a computer would do so, like you're teaching the computer how to play the game.
Unpredictability is fundamental behind Counter-Strike. Pretty much every decision made at a high level is influenced in some way by unpredictability. Counter-Strike, it's a percentage game, and being unpredictable really shifts the game in your favor. It's a simple game at the surface, but there's a lot feeding into every decision at both a macro and micro level. If a player plays by the book, it makes it really easy for opponents to read how they're playing and to counter them. So one of the most important things in Team CS is conditioning, where you manipulate the enemy team into respecting you. It's showing the enemy a specific way you can play around, so they have to think about that for the rest of the game. Conditioning teams makes a team really hard to read and impacts how the enemies think about approaching rounds. Unpredictability can be used in order to abuse this concept. So, for example, if a team conditions heavy aggression on one site throughout a game, the enemy will probably adjust to try and prevent that. Like, they'll rotate over other players off of their positions to anticipate the aggression, but this can then be exploited to leave other parts of the map weak. And this concept is key to winning rounds. Like, there might even be rounds used specifically to condition an enemy to set up a win later in, say, a less winnable round. But this less winnable round will be made more winnable through being unpredictable. In a macro perspective, being unpredictable with different setups will make it a lot harder for enemies to anticipate any given setup. Every map has what's called set defaults, where you're set to maintain map control on CT, or on the T side, you're gathering info, holding for CT aggression, and keeping your presence up. These can vary, like from your typical 1-2-2 setup, where you'll maybe place one player A site, two players on mid, and two players on B, common in maps like Anubis, Ancient, Dust 2, and Mirage, to a 1-3-1 setup, where you're looking to fight more towards mid to secure map control. Adding slight variations in these defaults exploits how the enemy thinks about playing, whether it be in their rotations, their crosshair placement, their utility usage, etc. It also influences how they might call rounds, being more hesitant to approach certain areas or call specific tactics based on how you've either responded or what you've conditioned. For example, if we're on CT side Mirage and we've placed the AWPer commonly towards the A site, where they might have found a lot of success, this might exploit the enemies into wanting to go B more, where off of that we can place more players towards B, or then place the AWPer aggressive on B, where we might catch them not expecting it. This feeds well into another important macro of CS, which are rotations. Players won't stay static in one position on a map. If they play the same position every round, it makes it so easy to read them and to abuse them. Say if an A anchor on Mirage is playing balcony most rounds, the opponents are going to make it a priority to clear them out, or even use utility specifically to counter them, force them to be uncomfortable. If players are unpredictable and dynamic with their positioning, it makes it significantly harder to read, and it can raise the percentage of winning rounds. Another big example would be with AWPers. AWPers, where it's important they stay unpredictable. It's common that teams will want to stay away from or flush out AWPers, as they're typically the most dangerous player, but if they're very dynamic in their positioning, teams might call directly into the AWP. My role, lurking, it's built off of being unpredictable and finding gaps around the map to exploit. Lurkers will use being unpredictable to catch timings on enemies, take space being given up, and conditioning enemies to expect more at their position than there actually is. If a lurker commits to a lurk every round, the enemy will always expect something other than the main execute of a round, so the lurker needs to make their playstyle very unpredictable. Otherwise, their lurk is lowering the chance of winning a round. Like, it's ultimately pointless. If a lurker doesn't commit to any lurks at the start, but then lurks in a later round, it will help them find a lot more success and make the site take or hold a lot easier for their team. Sometimes lurkers will find a gap and look to take space if they haven't felt much, if any presence. Say if the CT have stacked a bomb site predicting an execute, where the call in a round can be switched almost entirely off of what the lurker has found. This kind of move can be a gamble walking into a stack where, say, they're not showing presence but they're actually on the site, or it can ultimately decide the rounds that you shouldn't be losing, where the execute would have been a significantly lower percentage of winning in comparison to letting the lurker poke and trying to find this gap. In a micro point of view, pretty much every fundamental can be influenced through unpredictability. Aim, for example, is influenced through crosshair placement, where a player might expect a certain type of peak, placing their crosshair either a bit wider or even closer to the angle, just off how an enemy has been peeking them in the past, depending if they play into their prediction. Other things like movement can be unpredictable, where a player with an SMG might try and wide jump out into a position, making themselves hard to hit and making the spray transfer on their trading teammate a lot more difficult, pretty much giving them that space for free. Making sure you don't play into what an enemy expects of you and making yourself unreadable is key to Counter-Strike, and it's one of the most important parts of turning yourself into a great player. Sometimes being unpredictable can be a bad thing though, it's no positive. If in a round a CT player just runs for a smoke they've thrown on, let's say, ramp on Mirage, with no utility or support, it's not going to be the expected or predicted play, but it's very unlikely to be successful. All it would take for this play to have a higher chance of being successful is support, like having a teammate for a flash for you, or coming through the smoke in order to trade, or even combining those two. It's maybe making it a 3-man play where you have one teammate flashing for the two of you and you go fight together. It's important to make sure when you're being unpredictable, you're doing it in a way that's supported by your team in order to be set up for success.
I think that the most unpredictable factor in Overwatch is your teammates, because everything else is set in place, right?
Yeah.
Like, the characters don't have any sort of attachments. You can't change anything about the game. The game is what it is. At the moment, it's not good. But your teammates are like the primary random factor. So I think it sucks. I think that the idea that one core piece of my team of not that many people can come into the game and be very bad, and then the game becomes much more difficult. I don't think it's unwinnable. I think as long as you are substantially better than your opponent, you can win. But the problem with Overwatch is, let's say 2 teams come in as 6v6, because 5v5 doesn't exist in my head, and 5 of you are even with 5 of them. Then there's that one random factor. They get, like, I don't know, they get LH Cloudy on tank, and now they have fucking perfect coordination because he's gonna calm the game to a victory, like, easily. And we get Moira one-trick. We're going to lose. Not because the Moira one-trick plays Moira, or because they're one-trick, but because they're not going to be good. Either that, or somebody else on my team has to be worth 2 people. But then you're essentially saying that somebody on my team has to be substantially better to make up for the random factor of somebody on my team being substantially worse. That's the part of Overwatch that sucks. So then what you need to be, if you want to guarantee that you're going to climb, you need to be 3 times as good as everybody else in the lobby, so that your team effectively has 1 more good player point. And then whoever has more of a capacity per player will probably win the game. Even then, it's kind of random, because then there's the hero pick component. Like, if you get a one-trick on your team, it's a game built around people counter-picking things, right?
Yeah.
There are certain characters that were designed to counter the mechanics of other characters. And then you get a guy on your team, like me, because I tend to one-trick fucking really bad characters because I think it's fun. And I used to play like just Torbjorn, Hanzo, Symmetra and shit back in the early seasons and fucking run it down. But I still won, so it doesn't matter. I would have been the random factor that you get on your team. And the thing that I had to think about is that every single time you queue into a game and you're playing a character, back in the day, some characters would just explode the mental of your teammates if you lock them. Like you queue into a game and there's no role queue. Like everyone picks everything. You have to just pray that 2 people on the team feel like playing tank because people decided that 2-2-2 is the best thing. I don't think this works so much anymore because nowadays everyone's kind of viable, I feel like. I haven't played Overwatch 2 enough to really give like a solid opinion. But I think everyone is decently playable. And then GOATs came about, and then everyone was like, oh, never mind, who needs DPS anyway? And then they had to rethink everything again. When I queue into a game, hypothetically, I get 2 tank players, I get 2 support players, I get one other DPS player, and it's just me left. I want to insta-lock Torbjorn. When I do that, there's the unpredictable factor of, are my teammates going to end the game because I picked this character? Same goes for Valorant. I'm not the same level of high elo in Valorant. I hover around Immortal. But the thing that happens in that rank is you queue into the game, and I'm going to pick whoever I feel like playing. So, I don't know, fucking Raze or something. You insta-lock it, and then you're relying on the unpredictable factor of will your teammates be bothered to play a viable team comp. The thing about team comp is I don't think that team comp is as big of a factor as mental is in games like this. In like 5v5 team hero-based shooters. I feel like mental's the most unpredictable thing in online gaming. The mental of your teammates is so important. If I was going to make a team, like for example, our Apex team, I would so much rather have you than somebody else who is way better mechanically, but is not willing to listen at all. When we were initially having the disagreements where we weren't sure who should be the IGL and things like that, and then I would be like, basically just tell you what happened. And you would be like, oh yeah, shit, I made a mistake. Or you would tell me and I'd be like, oh yeah, true. Okay, I'll adjust that for next time. I think that is the reason that we were able to do decent. If you are unwilling to listen to me, we're fucked. Not only would we not have done well, but it wouldn't have been fun. And that's the whole point, isn't it? The point is for games to be fun. This is a tip for calling in fucking competitive games. Even if you don't know if your call is going to be good, just fucking make it, fully believe in it. Maybe you lose that game, but then you just recalibrate. And the next time your call's a little bit better. Yeah. And then you fuck up again. And the next time your call's a little bit better, you fuck up again. And then after messing up as many times as you need to mess up, suddenly you're a pretty good IGL. So that was the only reason that I was able to transition so easily to IGLing Apex, is because I've got like 6,000 hours in Overwatch. I would say I spent 1,000 of them not really knowing what I was doing. It didn't matter if I was winning, because it just meant that other people knew less what they were doing. But I don't really think players had worked out how the game worked until like season 4 or 5. Season 4 is my favorite season. Not just because it's like my best season. Okay, just because it's my best season.
Apex is particularly bad for this. There's like a huge amount placed on like individual skill, and that's not necessarily the issue in and of itself, but where the issue does arise is that people overlook like the game sense side of things. If there's one thing that you need to come to the table with, like when you're first coming into comp, it's mechanics, and anything else associated with like the whole game sense and decision making idea, you kind of just absorb it in some ethereal way by playing the game. That kind of leads to like a very fixed mindset, I would say, about making plays and stuff, and this idea of like what's unconventional. You tend to find it's almost kind of like the Dunning-Kruger curve, where you have like this sort of peak of Mount Stupid at sort of a low level, except that's occurring at mid to high level comp around like, I guess, tier 2 level, where you get people that they know that they're good because like they can go and play against the average player and absolutely roll them like 99 times out of 100. But the issue is that they still lose to bad teams because they're kind of stuck in this mindset of how you sort of quote unquote should play the game. And I was definitely very guilty of this when I first started playing as well. A team pushes you and you die, and they will probably get third-partied, or they die very soon after making some dumb play. And there's like a hope cycle that a lot of players go through where you basically complain about like, why did they push us? And it's usually just complaining about the fact you've died, but like the underlying thought process is there that like this play, which might not be like optimal, you kind of almost throw it away, and like you don't even consider like why they made that decision, why they could have made that decision in the first place. I think it's very much like linked to this sort of negative mindset, I guess. You see it as well when some of the like CIS teams had major pushes historically. They have played a playstyle that's not really matched how a lot of the community saw the game was sort of quote unquote supposed to be played. They were playing like highly aggressive characters from the Harvester in the center of the map. They weren't really like turbo rotating to zone like any other team that would land there. They certainly caused a lot of disruption, and there was a lot of complaining, but the reality is that they won a Pro League split doing this. So like, it was probably not like a case of in spite of the plays, it's purely the fact that no one was expecting it to some extent, and the idea that this play style is being entirely overlooked.
Unconventional plays, I think, are also right plays, but it's very heavily situational. You could have the perfect play, but one bullet to the head or one shot from an orc can take you out of a round, or at worst, lose you it. It's just about how you use being unpredictable to make these kinds of situations rarer. Sometimes the right play is opting to abuse how the enemy thinks about you as a player in order to make your game more successful. So you being unpredictable as a player can put doubt into how the enemy thinks as well. Ooh.
The cracks, man, the cracks.
Oh. Teams nowadays are looking less at unconventional plays, not to make themselves readable, but to set themselves up for better success, mainly with economy management. They're obviously still looking at unconventional plays, but it's about making sure you're prioritizing higher percentage in every game. And in CT man disadvantage rounds, like 3v4s, 3v5s, you might opt to save your guns to the next round instead of going for the retake, which is a bit more unconventional, the retake. It was a lot more common a few years ago, but economy management is another way to be unpredictable. Teams might look to call an unconventional force buy or eco round to build up their money to set themselves up for future rounds. It might catch the enemies off guard, make them waste utility when rounds where they don't actually need to use it, or then lose guns, meaning they have to rebuy it, which can mess up their economy. At a higher level, you definitely have to look more into how to be unconventional, but you also have more to exploit, as your opponents will be reading more into every move you make. A lower level player might think less or even more of a specific sound cue or visual, while higher level players will have encountered many scenarios of such where they'll know the higher percentage response. I think it's a good thing to consider unconventional plays, no matter your level, but they need to be done properly. You could have seen a pro player make an unconventional play and it be very successful, but the round it was in might have heavily influenced that decision. Maybe a teammate from across the map conditioned or helped set up the play, or some key information was caught to lead them to make the decision. You wouldn't have known this, but you could have gone for this kind of play at the completely wrong moment, and it could cost your team a round.
I think people make the unconventional play all the time by accident. I think people who don't know what that there's like if we imagine it as like a curve, like a bell curve. At the beginning of when you start playing a game, you keep making unconventional, unpredictable plays because you don't know what the good play is. Then you climb up the bell curve, you start to know what you're doing. You're now like pretty good. You are now mostly making the correct play to the best of your ability. Like the best play that you think you can make at this time period. Even if you don't necessarily know the actual best play, you're making the best play that you can think of in that moment. And then you go down the other side of the bell curve, you hit people who like absolutely sweat the fuck out of the game. And then you get to the people who wrap back around and they just start making unconventional plays. Like everything they do is completely random. But this time it will work. Now it's working consistently. And so what we have to work out isn't why they're being unpredictable, but rather why it's working. And the reason that the like top level of player they make decisions that seem unoptimal. They know so well what the correct play is that everybody has optimized the game to the point where everybody is playing as optimally as they can. And that means everybody is predictable. If everybody's predictable, the only way to win is to be unpredictable. And so that's why the higher you go, the more often you'll see people make quote-unquote mistakes on purpose.
The idea of like whatever makes a smart play, it's important to sort of understand what that kind of statement means, or at least how anyone's going to interpret it. The way that I would see it is that a smart play is basically making the most out of the sort of the hand you're dealt. And in Apex, sometimes that can be pretty dire, and you can be left with some pretty bad decisions all round. It can be basically die trying to kill a team, or die to the ring because you're out of position. You know, and you can think about like all of the other decisions that sort of lead up to that point, but if we take it in isolation, like the smart player will try to optimize as best as they can in the moment based on whatever happens. Whether or not that means that the optimal play is unpredictable, I'm not certain whether that's the case, because I would say that with the way that I've attempted to improve in the game was looking at it in this sort of logical way and almost constructing like a framework and like a set of rules of like how you want to play the game quote unquote optimally. And for a long time that sort of led to this sort of robotic gameplay that was obsessed with doing the the quote-unquote correct thing rather than like what's going to win. And I think the difference between correctness and like I guess effectiveness is unpredictability, purely because if you're always doing, if you're always acting on like basically a very simple decision-making structure, then other people are going to recognize the patterns in your behavior and they're going to figure out ways to abuse that. Yes, if we're saying that like a smart play includes this idea of like optimal winning strategy, then in theory that person should have the largest tool set to sort of push them in the direction of winning. So I guess, yeah, we would probably say that they are the best player in the world. I guess the caveat with that is obviously that they can actually execute. Obviously, you're going to have players that sort of understand, but they might not be able to actually like have the decision making in the moment, on stage, or like even just, in an online tournament when they've got nerves running high. And often the players that can't execute become coaches, as would be the case in any sport or any game or anything like that.
Actively, yes, but they have to be calculated. That's what makes them smart. I strongly agree with the statement, although I believe there needs to be a fine balance with these kinds of plays. The best player will know this balance, being able to make informed and calculated decisions almost instantly. The best players making these decisions and the strength of competition is what makes CS so entertaining to me. On the surface, it's such a simple game. Terrorists and counter-terrorists. Terrorists want to blow up the bomb sites or kill all the CTs. CTs want to stop them. Unpredictability in every decision of the game keeps the game so complex and fresh, and it keeps me wanting to come back to play it.
I think the smart play isn't always the unpredictable play. The quote-unquote smart play is to play the game perfectly optimally. Basically, as far as your question, I think the answer is that you need both, right?
Yeah.
I think both can work. I don't know, it sort of depends on the game, which one could hypothetically be a better path for most people, but I think both will work. I think whatever playstyle you like the most is the best playstyle. Because you will simply take it, get really fucking good at it, and maybe you'll make it the best playstyle in that game. As long as the game has depth, you can play and optimize it to be whatever you want. That's what a good game would have, at least. When I watched your video, this is what came to mind was Serral and Dark in StarCraft 2. Basically, Serral is a pro player from Finland. He's currently like the best player in the world in StarCraft 2. As far as your overall ability to pump units out and just run your loop, make sure that you're doing all the little stuff you need to do while still making the biggest possible army, Serral is the best. Like, that dude will just produce more units per unit than anybody else, so that when it comes time to fight, his army is just bigger. And at that point, if you and him are even on your ability to micro your units, he will win because he simply has more. As far as StarCraft 2, you don't have to go so hardcore on that area like Serral does, right? You can be more like the Korean Zerg player Dark, whose strategy was, fuck the correct play, I'm just going to play really weird, and then they won't know what to do, panic, make a mistake, and then I win. So he'll do things like, you know how the idea, I mean, I don't know if you know too much about StarCraft 2, but the idea of StarCraft 2 is that you create an army with a good variety of units that each have their own abilities. Like, imagine League of Legends, but your team has 100 people and you have to control all 100 people
by
yourself.
Oh my god.
Yeah,
How the fuck
that's
do you
StarCraft
play
2.
that game?
It's also often more than 100 people. Because each of the little guys you have to control usually doesn't have more than like 1 to 3 abilities, if that. Sometimes they have none. So it's a really hard game. You have to think about the composition of your army as well, right?
Oh my god.
So like, you have to make sure that you have enough units of this type so that you can do this, but then you need enough units of this type so that they complement these units. Like, if you're playing Terran, then you need to make sure that you have the guys who can heal your guys who shoot or whatever. If you're going to play, I don't know, there's a whole bunch of different stuff. I don't know the game well enough to explain it to you though, but I watch it because it's fun to watch, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm good at it.
Fair enough.
But the thing about Dark that's interesting, I don't think he pioneered the strategy, right? Because I think, as I said, like, at some point, I'm sure some new player was like, oh, well, I mean, I can already make these guys, so why bother making anyone else? That's a strategy where the Zerg faction just produce the first little guy that you can make. So your first little unit that has like no HP, and you make 2 of them per single egg. So like, the idea of them is you just have a lot of them, but they're very weak, and they kind of just act as fodder most of the time. If you don't like actively counter them, they'll kill shit. But they're not difficult to counter, in theory.
So at this point, it's more like a quantity over quality thing
Exactly. But like that's not a good strategy because
No.
when you're playing at the highest level, the assumption is that the quality is going to be really good, and
But then he
oftentimes
does
they'll
that.
have quantity and quality, right? But then Dark will go, oh well, and like you come to StarCraft 2, you're new, you're like, oh well, I only really know how to make this one guy, so I'm just going to make this one guy. I don't know what all these other buildings are. All the other buildings are how you're able to make like more upgraded units, right?
Yeah.
But if you're brand new, you're like, oh, I don't have to deal with that. They take time to build as well. I like these little guys. I'm just going to make a lot of them.
Okay.
What Dark will do is he'll take the fact that his macro is exceptional and he has a lot of supply. He has a lot of capacity to build these little men. And he will optimize his entire strategy so that, let's say he's playing against a dude who has 200 units of really decently composed army, like a really strong army with 200 people that's made in the correct way. He will fling 1,000 of his little guys at it. But I mean, he does a bunch of other weird shit. Like he just doesn't. He tends to look at how other people want to play the game in terms of optimization, and then go, okay, how can I break this? That makes him really entertaining. The problem is it's also quite coin flippy. You're relying on the idea that they don't realize that you're doing something stupid. So once you get a reputation as a player who does something stupid every game, people will start to try really, really hard to understand what you're doing. Then you extrapolate the idea more, you know? Then you work out, how do I hide what I'm doing? What other strategy can I do? You just keep optimizing, and eventually you find a new way to play the game. So more than being unpredictable, I think innovating is really important. Just keep playing your own game. I don't think it really... I think meta is important if you want to play at an absurdly high level. But I think the reason that when you look at a game, you look at multiple different metas is because metas change. We discover the new best way to play the game. And somebody has to discover the new best way to play the game. So don't be boring. Everybody be more interesting.
Wow.
Be silly. It's more fun. And maybe you accidentally find the best new way to play the game.
Okay, now you guys can listen to me pretending to be a top level CS player giving their opinion on my questions. I would like to address your third question. From what you're saying on if a player is unpredictable and the opposition cannot predict what they're going to do next, will they be the best player in the world? The answer is no, as nowadays a lot of mainstream shooter games, especially that are popular on YouTube, actually have little to no connection to unpredictability. If anything, it will cause more harm to teamwork, to especially the multiplayer shooter category. If you tell me it is a 1v1 however in a regular CS game, and the map they're playing on is very complex in terms of structure, then unpredictability will play a very big role in increasing the chance of winning for both sides. But if the 1v1 is to occur on an aim duel map, unpredictability then becomes basically useless. Now, Apex Legend. 1v1, but I give you a building. You can run around and look for different angles to kill the other player. In this case, the side who can utilize the idea of unpredictability will have the best chance of winning. Your statement can only be debatably true in terms of a 1v1, but less applicable when there are more players involved, where teamwork then becomes more important. And also, you are addressing the best player. But there are two types of best player. One type who are the best against the casual player base, while the other being the best against the professional player base. And this is especially prominent in Apex Legends. Okay, let's take Lemonhead and Fade as an example. Two are the best movement players out there. Easily 1v3 in full teams in lobbies. Fade, who is especially the case because what Fade does is, he runs around a zipline building or uses the terrain to confuse the enemy team, hence being unpredictable until one of their teammates gets singled out, and he then picks them off one by one. Now, let's put Lemonhead, Fade, and another individual who has really good movement, you put them up against Team Falcon. Who do you think is gonna win? This is where I said if Fade gets a zipline building, they will definitely win. Not even zipline building. They wouldn't win, because a pro team would never move by themselves, as they will always stick together. If you watch LGS normally, you would not see a team that's very spread out, and when they start to fight, they stick to each other as close as possible. So therefore, isn't this the perfect counter to your argument saying mastering unpredictability won't help you win basically every time? Instead, it should be your mechanics like aim plus teamwork. But there's another case if you put How 1v1 against either Fade or Lemonhead, then the result could be different with more application of unpredictability. So the problem with your statement is you need to specify if it's applied towards the general player base or the professional scene. If you want someone to go pop stomp, I think Fade will have a higher chance of winning the whole thing, whereas compared to How. Now let's talk about unpredictability in CS2. Okay, for example, you're an A player. You have multiple scenarios you can run. When your teammates are mid focused on CT side and connector pushing mid, your best choice of action should be jump spotting from CT or just jiggle peeking. So, when you see people pushing A ramp, you can give information to your teammates, and if there aren't anyone showing up on mid, they can come help on A site or play retake. So now sometimes I have a teammate at stairs, so jump spotting from CT may not be as viable, so I'm going to play Shadow. But should I be hiding in shadows for 46 rounds straight? Obviously not, so I should switch it up. I can go play default, and after playing once default, I can play sandwich, and that becomes my contribution of unpredictability to the game. But then in another sense, this doesn't really count as unpredictability, as in terms of pros, everyone has their own routine or way of playing throughout the start or until the end of the game. Depending on where the teammates are playing, for example, I know my teammates are always mid-focus. And using that info, I'm going to make the decision of staying CT and do jump spot instead of hard holding one angle. All of these plays, after you start playing at a higher level, all becomes predictable. As the more experience you have, the more obvious will play the opposition is going to run. There's another example. In high elo playing on Inferno, you predict the CT side will eco round, then you should try your best to avoid apps, as the CT side can buy weapons that are really good for close range and get picks on T side for free. Whereas long then becomes a better option because you have rifles. But if it's a normal rifle round, first of all, you can get people from both sides. Second of all, scout or sniper can hold long from top mid, which is pretty bad. Therefore, you have to take apps control, smoke off long, and take long control. This is the only way to play Inferno in most cases in high elo. So this is why unpredictability isn't the best weapon to win games. In high elo CS2 is literally just both sides trying to predict what variant play each side is going to run. So whoever can identify what play the other side is running first can basically win the game by adjusting in advance to counter. And the rest will come down to mechanics and gunplay. What differs low elo players or high elo players are, other than game sense to do unpredictable play, high elo and pros have significantly better foundation, that's their raw aim and mindset. So when you die to weird plays like them pushing through the smokes and you say they don't know how to play the game correctly, it will almost never happen to pros and high elo players, as they will always have the mindset of expect anything. So they will always be prepared no matter what you throw at them. Other than having aim, the pros are the strongest because their map knowledge on every map are top notch, which is what separates them from the normal player base or potentially the higher elo player base. And of course, not everyone's going to be perfect, so that's why they're a team, to be there to compensate for each other. So unpredictability becomes different in every shooter games. It won't be the best because they can't replace the foundation. In CS2's case, it's aim and teamwork. In Apex's terms, since lower elo is more movement and aim, when it goes up to the higher level and pros, it's aim and the macros, hence positioning, rotations, and only the base knowledge of movement contributed into the individual's player skill level. Okay. Now that we're done with what he said, let me show you some gameplay footage that he showed me, while me telling you what he was telling me during the time when he was showing it. So basically this first clip it was him explaining to me on how he died here. He simply just didn't expect the guy to re-peek because initially he saw him jump back in. So he told me that he made the assumption that this guy's a very aggressive player judging from this play. So the next round he bought an AWP, and he was able to win that gunfight is because he simply has an AWP. And here's the second clip. Basically, this is an unpredictable play from the enemy. He decided to smoke off that arch and then nade the smoke to kill the T side. But what Kenny did was he thought the exact same thing and also decided to nade the smoke, but then his nade exploded a bit late, but he was able to win the fight simply because he has an AWP again. And here's the third clip. Basically what Kenny told me was he knows that standing behind the smoke is actually considered a very common play, but maybe in this situation, in that enemy's head, he's gonna think, oh, me standing here is gonna be very risky, but no one's gonna expect it. But Kenny, in fact, expected it, and he was able to pre-aim and kill the guy. And here's the fourth clip. Actually, I'm just gonna let it play first.
Trupson, you can't fight Darth Maul when he has both lightsabers. If one left, one right.
One mid.
One mid, one stairs.
They come in stairs, so
Kenny carry. That guy killed me there.
One more. Right side.
I'm so smart, look at me. 200 IQ.
I think it's B.
You think a lot, my friend. Just hold your position.
No, I'm dead now.
Yeah, but there's no way that he would have beat Obi-Wan anyway.
B. Can watch his stream.
Kenny sus actually.
Holy
Here, a
moly.
little gift for you, Olof.
So what happened here was Kenny told me he decided to shift walk all the way into the site and then plant, but then go for temple because that's normally the right play. He kills Olaf in this case, but then he thought Olaf saw him rotating into temple. So what he did was, with that assumption, he decided to go into the smoke and go to connector again, and he was able to kill the other guy coming from the other site. And for the last clip, he knows someone is down around sniper nest, so he made an assumption that the guy with the sniper, in this case Olaf, is holding from the left side on the window. So he just ran out and pre-fired the angle and killed him. Okay, so now that we're done with the interviews, let's do some matching games. Starting with the similarities. First of all, everyone seems to agree on that unpredictability can be an effective tool, but its value varies significantly depending on the game, situation, context, and skill levels. And also, having immaculate foundation skills like mechanics, game sense, and teamwork can bring out the most out of unpredictability. And all of them seems to have mentioned that in a higher level of gameplay, players become predictable in the sense that there are only a set amount of plays you can run depending on the situation with only so many possibilities, and if you always do textbook executes throughout each game, thus making you predictable. Second of all, there was the idea of applying unpredictability not within the gameplay, but with your teammates, as your teammates' skill level and their level of ego, hence to cooperate, can heavily impact how a game could go. Okay, actually, maybe only Noble mentioned this, but never mind. Third of all, they all agree that smart plays involves adapting to the situation, which sometimes include unpredictability, but is not solely defined by it, thus separating these two ideas, as I used to think they're the same thing. And last of all, just to highlight on how everyone seems to have a point on how unpredictability is influenced by in-game factors again, Kenny thinks Apex and CS2's mechanics differs in their reliance on unpredictability. Bear thinks conditioning and economy management plays a significant role in affecting unpredictable play in CS2. Miloshki thinks RNG and meta impacts Apex significantly, hence creating scenarios where players will make unpredictable plays depending on the situation. And Noble thinks not only the hero diversity can create drastic variation in plays, and also how our teammates are also a factor of unpredictability. Now, for the differences. To start with their opinion on limitation of unpredictability. Kenny thinks unpredictability is more impactful in 1v1 scenarios or low skill environments, and somewhat less useful in higher levels where teammates and strategy would dominate more in CS2. But Bear counters that, saying unpredictability is a fundamental factor in CS2 through conditioning and exploiting the opponent expectations. Moving on. Miloshki views unpredictability as a necessary element to avoid robotic playstyles and optimize strategies, while Noble focuses more on the teammates' mental states rather than the gameplays themselves. Actually, in this case, it would be debatable as they're talking about different games. Second of all, their views on what makes the best player. Kenny differentiates two types of best players, one who excels in casual player base and while the other one excels in the pro scene, and also highlighting the foundation mechanics instead of solely relying on unpredictable thinking. Miloshki and Bear focuses on adaptability, optimization, and decision making as traits of what makes a top player, and Noble emphasizes the mental resilience and the ability to adapt to factors outside of gameplay, hence your teammates. And at last, Kenny and Bear seems to both agree that unconventional plays must be calculated and not reckless, while Miloshki and Noble wishes to push the idea of experimentation and finding a personal playstyle to involve. In conclusion, at least everyone seems to agree to an extent that unpredictability is a valuable tool in competitive play. They all agree that unpredictability's role varies by game mechanics, context, and skill level. At a higher level, predicting the opponents become common due to set plays and experiences, and unconventional strategies can break the patterns and offer advantages. And what impacts the idea of unpredictability across the titles that were mentioned throughout the videos are conditioning and specific situations in CS2, Apex's meta and RNG, Overwatch's hero diversity, and a concept that carries out across all multiplayer shooter games, the player's mental. Now back to my theory. The person who can actively pull off smart plays, hence unpredictable plays, will be the best player in the world. Well, looks like now that is no longer correct, as the best player will first need to have close to perfection mechanics, has an immense amount of knowledge on the game they're playing, have the ability to think and execute under pressure, plus reliable teammates who can back them up, and last but not least, something that I thought would be the caviar on top: luck. Looking back, I'm glad that I decided to make this video. Not only it has answered a long-running question of mine, I also learned a lot about what makes a great player, because these interviews were literally free coaching sessions because the people who I have interviewed were all very educated in their game. And now, with all these knowledge in hand, I thought wouldn't it be cool if I were to actually use them and learn to apply it to one of my favorite games. See if I can improve myself to go beyond my current skill level. Well, do feel free to make some suggestions in the comment section, but for now, thanks for watching and please like and subscribe.
Oh
Bro,
shit.
we need this guy. Oh my god, he's literally in a Family Guy death pose. What the fuck? Wait, come look at this guy.
Nah, there's no way you're molesting my dead body, bro.
Oh, he's got. What the fuck is this position?
Okay. Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. I can play here. Like.
Do you think you're gonna? What the fuck are you two doing?
When you clear here, you don't go clear that first.